Welcome to the rebellion.
Cassian Andor is back for a second and final season, fomenting rebellion and inching closer to the veteran operative we first met in 2016's Rogue One. But as good as the first season of this show was, and it was a very good season of television, having the title character's end point firmly in sight is the exact reason why Andor is even better in the second season.
There's a future here for those who dare.
The first season of Andor took a lot of us by surprise. Now, I'm a Star Wars guy from way back. I'm pre-special edition original trilogy years old, and it's been fascinating watching the evolution of this franchise, particularly where fleshing out the canon is concerned, and particularly in the Disney Plus era. Now, I'm not normally a fan of, filling in every little detail or painting all the way to the edge of the canvas, as it were, but that's exactly why Andor really stands out for me. A prequel series to a prequel movie, on paper at least, starts out in a bit of a hole, thanks to the simple fact that we know how Cassian Andor's story ends. More than that, we know what happens with the entire rebellion, and what happens after. But instead of that making the proceedings, any less interesting, Tony Gilroy and the writers and directors behind Andor use it to their advantage. Season 2 of Andor cements this series and these characters as a truly entertaining and tragic piece of drama.
If it goes up in flames, it will burn very brightly.
Now, Star Wars, of course, is no stranger to prequels. Ever since George Lucas decided to call the second movie Episode 5, the prequel die had been cast. And as big and expansive as the galaxy far, far away has become, chances are pretty good whatever corner of the franchise we're watching is taking place before events that we've already seen. Star Wars, as a connected universe, has long leaned into that sort of dramatic irony, or situations where the audience knows more about what's happening than the characters on screen do. We know little Annie grows up to be Darth Vader, we've been more or less told how it happened, and now we get to see it. This is ancient Greek stuff. It's nothing new, but it's nonetheless difficult to pull off really well. And it's been the way Star Wars has done business since The Phantom Menace in 1999. Now, the difference between good and bad Star Wars, especially recently in the Disney era, has been how deftly they can pull off that dramatic irony. For example, when they prequelized Han in Solo, he got a big heroic face turn that sort of undermined the face turn he made in the original Star Wars film that helped him become such a beloved character back in 1977. Obi-Wan Kenobi did this as well, giving our favorite old desert hermit an adventure to go on with Princess Leia that makes a lot of their interaction in the original Star Wars make less sense. Even Lucas's prequel trilogy wrapped up in a way that makes me think R2-D2 really could have done a lot more. Andor, on the other hand, writes this dramatic irony into the actual plot of the show. They did it really well in Season 1, and in Season 2, it's an absolute masterclass. Where Season 1 talks about the price that needs to be paid during this rebellion, Season 2 very actively shows it. There's an exhaustion that's very present and on the surface. We clearly see that the toll the rebellion is taking is starting to feel too expensive for some of these characters. Losses are felt more heavily. There's an inevitability that begins to seep in, a sense of fate that these characters can't escape, and that is where Andor Season 2 is truly successful, where other prequels in the Star Wars universe have not been. Because all of us out here in the audience know that most of these people are doomed, the biggest mistake Andor's creators could have made would have been to just focus on the, nuts and bolts of this story. The show, of course, does that too, but first and foremost, Andor is about what it's like to be doomed and continuing to fight anyway. The first season did an admirable job touching on that, but the second season does an excellent job of focusing on it. For example, we know that Cassian and K2SO are in Rogue One, so of course we know that they get out of this scrape and they will survive the trap they're walking into. Ditto anytime we think Mon Mothma might be in danger. But these moments are frankly the least interesting parts of this series. There are a few spots that feel like it's just kind of action for action's sake, but nearly always those scenes are centered around a character of whose fate we aren't quite as sure. That's the kind of thing creators of Andor clearly kept in mind in order to keep the outcomes of these scenes at least somewhat up in the air, and the proof of that is in just how much we're made to care about these new characters.
But if I'm giving up everything, I want to win.
The impact of the Empire and Rebellion is made personal at every turn. Everybody we meet for even a scene or two gets intimate stakes to deal with. Everything from how the Rebellion impacts business interests to the banality of Coruscant politicians carrying on as though nothing out of the ordinary is happening. That makes for a great juxtaposition in the season, by the way. On one hand, there's a scrappy and not altogether Rebellion struggling to survive, set against the persistence of the status quo among the galaxy's rulers on the other hand. It points the Rebellion's fight toward minds that need changing as well as military victories that need winning. Now, as a small but I think important aside, Andor Season 2 picks up a thread they started in the very beginning of Season 1, where the first episode included a title card for BBY5. Andor Season 2 picks up a year later with a similar title card reading BBY4. Before the Battle of Yavin is a dating system that's used only for our benefit, as a way for us real-worlders to keep track of how many years before or after the destruction of the first Death Star these episodes are taking place. Now, BBY5 is meaningless to the characters that exist within Star Wars. Now, this may seem like a small and no-duh sort of point, but this detail is not insignificant. It's a part of the whole, contributing to how effectively Andor navigates the challenges of existing in a canon that's as thoroughly fleshed out as Star Wars. Small but meaningful title cards, however, are not the only thing Season 2 continues successfully from Season 1. The structure of the 12 episodes, treating it more or less like 3 or 4 different arcs, is cleaner and more delineated in Season 2. In fact, it's a little hard to even call this a 12-episode season, actually. It's not quite 4 movies either. And Disney knows it too. It's why they're releasing Season 2 in 3-episode chunks. I think the most accurate way to talk about it is like it's just 4 episodes, since that's how you'll be watching it anyway.
They're building a weapon. The monster will come for us all!
The biggest effect of very cleanly splitting these episode drops in the narrative is the year that takes place in between each. We see things happen to characters one week, and then the following week, we see how those things have subtly changed those characters over the course of an entire year. So, nearly all of those changes happen off screen, which does a couple of things. One is that it gives the struggle of the Rebellion a real sense of scale. The Rebellion is playing the long game, and it's wearing down the heroes and villains of this show. Secondly, that structure really highlights just how good the performances in the series really are. Cassian's growth from a petty thief to a leader of the Rebellion doesn't happen gradually. It takes big leaps in the intervening time between episodes. The changes we see in Cassian are bigger. There's no transitional phase of his character growth, and that again feeds into the vibe of how much of a grind this Rebellion is. Stellan Skarsgård's Luthen Rael and Genevieve O'Reilly's Mon Mothma are particularly interesting in this regard as well. Both of them are obliged to wear 2 faces, and the weight of those masks affects them both in different ways throughout the 4 years depicted in this season. But where Season 2's performances really stand out for me are the villains. Denise Gough and Kyle Soller as Dedra Meero and Syril Karn, 2 incredibly ambitious but still wildly different people, are getting to do some incredibly interesting work. As their characters begin to see behind the Empire's curtain a bit and understand the nature of their role in it.
We must stand together. We will be crushed.
Having said all that, the closer Andor gets to its final destination, the more Season 2 loses me just a little bit. There are some moments at the end of the season that become more concerned with getting us narratively to Rogue One than seeing the stories of these characters that have gotten us this far all the way through. In that sense, it's hard to say it comes to a satisfying ending because it is not an ending. Rogue One is the end of Andor, effectively becoming Season 3 of the show, which means the 2 seasons of the Disney Plus series have largely left its resolution up to how you feel about Rogue One. Again, this is kind of the cost of doing business where prequels of prequels are concerned. At some point, you just have to manage that issue. It's only bits and pieces though, mostly concentrated in the final acts of the season, where some of the storytelling starts to feel a little more business-like than the rest. I found myself seeing where the show was going and not wanting it to get there. Some of that I chalk up to my own preference for stories that don't rely too much on connections to existing canon, but more than that, I just really like this story and these people.
The Empire cannot win.
Season 2 of Andor gets a 9. It builds on nearly everything that worked so well about Season 1 and continues fleshing out the prequel era of Star Wars. Ultimately, the tale of the unsung heroes of the rebellion, Andor creates very personal stories at the heart of a much larger struggle. Tony Gilroy and company managed to weave the dramatic irony inherent in a prequel series into the storytelling itself, making Andor Season 2 the most engaging the Star Wars franchise has been in quite a long time. So that's what I thought about Season 2 of Andor. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. And for more Andor reviews and for more of everything from the galaxy far, far away, be sure to subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.